If you're a hunter who's not sure what to do with his training right now, this episode of the podcast is for you. Coming to you from the farmhouse here in Pennsylvania. Got the dog curled up on the chair, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what we're doing in Backcountry Ready and Pathfinder right now to give you an idea of what hunters should be doing at this point in the year. Right now, it is February 7th as I record this. So 1 month of the year down, we're getting closer hunting season, and we're in what we call the early off-season phase. A couple goals with this time of year. First is we want to accrue as much aerobic training volume as possible to give us the longest runway possible for a couple of reasons. First, you need quite a bit of aerobic volume to make your aerobic system as efficient as possible, and you have to accrue that volume over time. That's how you make efficiency, that's how you build your endurance, and that's how, when you get to hunting season, you can rely more on your aerobic system than your anaerobic system to get you uphill, to get you downhill, and to help you go from day to day. You need a really long runway for that, and so we start it now. One of the reasons we start it for now is not only because you need the long runway, but because life happens. So the more that you can accrue right now, the better, because there's going to be times when you're going to have down weeks, when you got to travel or something comes up and you just can't get as much training in. And also there's just, life happens. That's the biggest thing, is things are going to get in the way. So as much as you can get done now to get the lead time, the better. The second thing we're going to work on this time of year, and this is something that we've actually changed this year, we're focused more on building strength right now. So typically in years past, we had focused on strength endurance and strength capacity right now, and then went more towards max strength as we got into the later parts of the off season. So we go early off season, late off season, pre-season, in season, then we start the whole cycle over again. Typically we would go strength endurance first for a good reason, because in a lot of times when you have the rule that you train capacity, then you train power or strength, right? So you train the capacity of the system, and then you make it work harder, and you make it work faster. Both works. The way that we're approaching it this year is we're focusing on strength first, and then layering the capacity on top of that, based on some of the conditioning changes that we're going to make. Listen, what we've done for years still works. It still works, and it would work now, but we're always looking to improve and hone and make things better. So we're building the engine first. One reason, a lot of our clients have been with us for a long time, and they have a lot of capacity. And so we're going to really add some strength on top of that capacity before we get into more strength capacity and strength endurance work, and then lead into more of the specific work that we'll do in the preseason. But as we increase our training volume, as we get into the later aspects of the off season and the preseason, they won't have as much capacity, room for recovery from doing heavy strength training. And so we're going to build that engine now and then transfer it into more strength endurance as the year goes on. Okay, so two things we're focused on right now. We're always focused on movement capacity, or mobility, whatever you want to call it. They're kind of the same thing, in a sense of the same thing. We always focus on that. A couple reasons. It keeps you healthy year round. Also, it's efficient. It keeps you efficient. The better you move, the less energy everything costs you. So we're focused on that year round. It gets a big portion of what we're doing right now. We're doing a lot of ankle mobility training. We're also doing a lot of hip flexor strengthening, general hip flexor strengthening. And that's something that I think a lot of programs miss on, because for uphills, for downhills, for stepping over logs, for stepping over boulders, all of that kind of stuff. Having really strong hip flexors is good just for the movement, but also because it protects your spine and it protects your hips. So we're doing a lot of general hip strengthening right now. We did it in the first phase. We're now on to phase 2, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. We went through one phase. We're on to phase 2. And so we're including a lot of that as well. We also do a lot of calf strengthening, both from a heavy aspect. We're doing heavy calf training, and we're also doing volume-based calf training. Keeps your feet healthy, keeps your ankles healthy, and also, the stronger your feet and your ankles are, the easier it is to push off the ground when you're hiking, uphill, downhill, flat ground, whatever. It just costs less energy. So we're focusing on that. Those are kind of the ancillary things that we're focusing on. So we're doing strength. We're doing a lot of aerobic capacity training. And in this phase, some of our folks get to do some more intense conditioning as well. And I'm going to get into all of that. Okay. So we break it down. We have a 5-day per week schedule is how we do it. So first day of the week, we have a strength session. Second day of the week is conditioning. Third day of the week is off. We take that day off. So we accrue some training stress, we have a dip, and then we come back and train again. This is important because it gives you the chance to recover. So if your training doesn't undulate, so happen in waves, if you don't go up with stress, down with stress, up with stress, down with stress throughout the week, then you don't give your body a chance to adapt because you're just constantly drawing resources. Now, are there times when you can train 6 days a week, maybe even 7 days a week? Sure. Especially if you're a professional athlete and your job is to train. But we have normal folks like you that have jobs, that have kids, that have other things going on. And so we have to be even more diligent in the way that we waive training stress throughout the week. Okay. That's the first thing. Now we have it set up for different time designations for conditioning across the week. So for example, that way it's easy to track volume. So for example, on Tuesdays, people can choose from a 30-minute session, a 45-minute session, or a 60-minute session. It's all based on the amount of time that they have to train that day and they can get in. Now, I would love for everybody to do the 60-minute session that day, and then the 60-minute session again on Friday, and then the 90-minute session that we have set up for Saturdays. But I know that that's not realistic for everyone. And so we have it set up so that people can still be successful, still accrue volume, and still get their work in. We also have it set up on the strength days that if people have time to get an extra session in, or if they need it to accrue volume, that there are extra 30-minute zone 1 and zone 2 sessions on those days so that people can accrue their volume across the week. We want to see people do at least 2 hours of aerobic training per week. That's about as much for most people. If you have any kind of training history, that's the minimum effective dose where you can really start to make progress. Now, at this time of the year, we really want to look at accruing, but we need longer sessions to really start moving our aerobic system forward. So we have to start getting into the 60, the 75, the 90-minute sessions, because time in your aerobic zones is what really starts to train your body to be efficient at using fat for fuel. You got to spend time in the zone to really train the systems so that your body mobilizes fat, uses it for fuel, and so that you tap less into carbohydrates. Now, one of the things that people need to know about your body's energy systems is they are all active all the time, right? It's just which energy system does most of the work depending on the duration of the exercise that you're doing and the intensity of the exercise that you're doing. So we want to train our body to mostly stay at the intensity where fat is going to predominate, because as we get going into the season, as we move, we want to train our zone 2 to move up, to go to a higher heart rate so that we stay in that zone and use fat for fuel for longer. The best way to do that and to make that more stable across time with less what we would call drift, which would be your heart rate rising, is to stay in the zone for a longer period of time, right? Because as your heart rate starts to go up, you start to recruit more fast twitch muscle fibers, which burn on carbs much, much, much better. And so then you're going to start to use carbs more, you're going to deplete yourself more, and you're just not going to have the same level of endurance. Now, you have to train your body to be efficient with carbs too, but we mostly want to train our body as much as possible to use fat for fuel across time. Now, I didn't have a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to cover it. Popped into my mind. So Monday, we go, I'll give you the basic layout of the week. Monday, we focus on strength. Tuesday, we condition. There's a few different ways that we'll do that during this phase, depending on the person. Wednesday's off. Thursday, we strength train. Friday, we condition. And Saturday, we condition. Okay? Now, the strength training day on Thursday, 2 options there. Now, if someone has enough of a strength base, we do a heavy strength session on Monday, and then on Thursday, we do more of a muscular endurance / strength endurance type session. During phase 1, it was more of a muscular endurance type session. We focused on tempo strength training, which increases the size of your slow twitch muscle fibers. Bigger your slow twitch muscle fibers are, the more endurance machinery you can fit inside them. And so that helps a lot as you're building endurance. Now we've transitioned, it's still a muscular endurance type training, but it's focused more on fast twitch muscle fibers. So the more efficient you can make your body at utilizing oxygen and training what's called oxidatively, the better your endurance. So you have muscle fibers, 2 different types of fast twitch muscle fibers. You have type 2X muscle fibers, which are much higher intensity and pretty much predominantly run on carbs. They do not, you can't train them oxidatively very well. You can't train them to use aerobic energy very well. Then you have type 2B fibers, and those kind of sit in the middle between fast twitch and slow twitch. They respond much better to oxidative training. So you can develop them aerobically much, much, much better. And so we do some training to focus on that at this point, during this point of the year. And so we do all of this with more general means. Okay, so a good training plan that's year round goes from general to specific, back to general, and then kind of circles through like that. We need a lot of general training just to maintain our abilities for life. And also, if you train hyper specifically all the time, you walk into situations where you overtrain things and you can't develop the rest of your body as well. And it also just limits the progress that you can make because you tax the same system over and over again, and then you hit a wall much, much, much faster. Okay. So especially when it comes to anaerobic type training, so the more higher intensity stuff, you can only do so much of that before you hit a wall and you stop making progress. Now, with regular strength training, regular aerobic training, your runway and your ability, your ceiling is much, much higher for that. Okay, you can continue to make progress with that stuff for way, way, way longer. They're also based on structural adaptations instead of metabolic adaptations. So that means, with strength, it's actually developing your muscles and it's developing your nervous system to send the message to those muscles. When it comes to aerobic training, the structural stuff comes more from, developing blood vessels, from developing your heart muscles, how well that they pump out pump out your blood. Now, there are metabolic adaptations for aerobic training too, but they're different than the high intensity metabolic adaptations, and they last longer. Okay, so now I'll give you an example. So if you developed your aerobic system and it was developed really well, and you didn't train aerobically for a month, you would lose, but not that much, right? Like you wouldn't lose all of your adaptations. And it takes a longer runway to build them. Now, anaerobic adaptations, so those higher intensity metabolic ones that I was telling you about, they'd leave you within weeks, right? So we use those more as we get closer to season to help us get ready for specific work, and then carry us forward into the season because you don't need that as much of it, and they just don't last as long, right? So we kind of touch on them throughout the year to kind of maintain them, but from a development standpoint, it doesn't take that much to get to where we need to be, especially for our purposes. Maybe for different people doing different things, it would be different. You'd shift the volumes in different ways. But for our purposes, we don't need that much, and they don't last that long. So we focus on the things that are going to give us the best bang for our buck, mostly year round. Okay, so another tangent. So I'm not going to apologize for it. On Mondays, we do heavy strength work, heavy strength and power work. And so I got my laptop up. I'm looking at the program right now. So we do some heavy jump training. We do just to load, to get our nervous system some output. So one of the things it does is it helps promote longevity, because the first thing that goes as we start to age, even younger than you think, is your power, because we start to lose fast twitch muscle fibers way faster than we lose slow twitch muscle fibers, and we lose the ability to send fast impulses from our nervous system to our muscles much faster than we lose everything else. So we want to do that for maintaining it. Also, being powerful helps with your strength, because it exists on the same spectrum. It's just how fast are you sending the impulse. So strength, power, they're similar adaptations, and so we want to train them both. Now, doing power work before you do heavy strength work also excites your nervous system. And that means that it prepares you to handle heavier strength training. So in our progression, during this time, we have what's called an intensive progression. So intensive means that you're adding weight to the progression. So we have a few different jumps. One is unloaded, depending on what people might need. And then we have two different loaded jumps that are done at a relatively high intensity. Right now, we're between 25% and 30% body weight. We do that to give ourselves the juice, man. We're juicing up, right? So not like steroids, you know what I mean? But like give our nervous system some juice. So we're gaining power, but also we're preparing to do strength training. In our first section of training, we also include core work and we include mobility work. So the core work this time is focused on our anterior core, which would be what most people think of as your abs. Through a few different ways that we challenge that based on where people are and how well they can control their core at this time. So there's progression built in there. And then we have two different mobility exercises based on what people might need. So the typical problems that you see with people are hip mobility issues and shoulder mobility issues. And when people go through our testing protocols, we tease that out. And so we have a selection for people that need more shoulder mobility, and we have a selection for people that need more hip mobility. And based on the outcome of their testing, they choose which one they do, right? Some people need both. Some people are cleared and they get to choose, right? So we have that set up. Then we move into our main lift, which is heavy. This week, we're going into the first week of this program. We're doing sets of 3 with 3 reps in reserve. Now, that's pretty heavy. So when you have 3 reps in reserve, it should feel like your last rep starts to slow down, but you're not grinding. Okay. So we have sets of 3, right? And we have 3 reps in reserve. So you're using a weight that you could do 6 reps with. Make sense? Last rep should still be in good form, but feel like you're starting to grind a little bit. Now we have it set up so folks can either squat or deadlift for this lift, for this one. If people really need a bigger strength ceiling, we typically guide them to deadlift for this, because deadlifting is going to move your strength ceiling up faster than squatting is, because it recruits the most muscle in the body, right? So you get more juice from your nervous system, you recruit more muscle, it helps to move your overall strength ceiling up higher. Now, if people are strong enough, hear the train in the background, maybe you don't. If people are strong enough, we move towards squatting movements. And these are all progressed. There's a progression built into the system based on someone's skill level, based on their current strength level. All of those kind of things are taken into account when we do this. So we'll squat for heavy sets of 3, and with that we do ankle mobility. Or we'll lift for heavy sets of 3, and then we'll do ankle mobility. Hugely undervalued and undertrained thing. Poor ankle mobility, I mean, it costs you during your lifts because you can't get into as good of positions, but also just moving up and downhill. If your ankles aren't moving as well as you can, you're going to waste energy. You're going to put yourself in worse positions, potentially injurious, and you just don't move as well. It's really important to maintain ankle mobility, especially with how much sitting and how much time we spend in shoes and all that kind of stuff. Now, you might say, why is heavy strength training important for a hunter? Most of what we do is endurance. Well, we can think of hunting especially like backcountry or mountain hunting, as a strength endurance event. You need to express strength over a very long period of time, because we are carrying shit usually, and we're also going uphill and downhill. Both of those, all of that requires strength, and it requires you to use your strength over time. Then just from a general standpoint, the stronger you are, the more resilient you are. Stronger tissues, better nervous system, your injury risk goes down tremendously if you're strong. But also, if you're strong, especially relative to your body weight, you just spend less energy to do everything, because you're functioning at a much lower relative intensity of what you're capable of all the time. So each step costs you less energy. So strength training is important for hunters, both from a resiliency standpoint and from an endurance standpoint. Then we go into what are what we call assistance lifts, which would be secondary lifts that either support what we're trying to accomplish from a movement standpoint, or in the traditional sense of strength training, supports your main movement and helps you get stronger at it. For us, it's more about creating balance in the body. or helping us get better at moving up and downhill. So we're doing like split squats, single leg deadlifts, things like that. And this is also where we work in our hip flexor strength and any kind of unilateral pressing that we're doing, just to create balance and general strength throughout the body. Being generally strong is important, and it's really important to create general strength at this time of the year, so you're more resilient as we move into more specific aspects of strength training and conditioning. And then this is also where we do our heavy calf work. Now, moving through the week, we get to Tuesday. If folks have accrued enough volume during phase 1, and they also did well on our cardiac drift test, meaning that, well, it's not our cardiac drift test. It's a cardiac drift test that we use. If you want to read about it, I'm going to put some more stuff out about it, but you can go to like Uphill Athlete or Evoke. I think it's called Evoke Endurance, and they have different stuff written up on cardiac drift tests. It gives you a good snapshot of where your current aerobic fitness is. If our folks have accrued enough volume and they have a good drift test, which would be somewhere between 3 and 5% on the test, we have some zone 3 work built in there to just start laying the foundation for that, right? So we want to start to get into zone 3 so we get efficient at burning carbs for fuel, continue to improve our efficiency at burning carbs for fuel, which will help prepare us for stuff down the road. So we have some zone 3 stuff set up on day 2. I put it on day 2 so that folks have an extra day of recovery between that session and the next session, because it's the first intense conditioning we're doing of the year. So that way we have a strength session, we have a higher intensity conditioning session, then we have some rest. And that allows us to recover before we go into our next strength session of the week. On that day, if our folks haven't accrued enough training volume during the first phase, or if their drift test was above 5%, then they're continuing to do aerobic training on that day. And like I said, they can choose from a 30-minute session, a 45-minute session, or a 60-minute session, depending on their time. Like I said, I would love to see people doing the 60-minute session. I know that that's not always going to be possible for people. I'm going to take a step back and remind you that there is that extra 30-minute session on Monday if people need to continue to accrue volume. Best thing to do is look out at the week and say, one of the things that people can do to really improve their training consistency is look at their week and plan ahead, or even look at their month and plan ahead. And so that way they know where they might need to accrue volume. Or if you just have extra time on that day and you want to get ahead, you have that extra 30-minute session. Typically, we coach people to move that session away from their strength training because of the adaptations in the heart. Because strength training builds really thick walls in your heart. It's not necessarily, if you overemphasize strength training, you will thicken the walls of your heart in a way that's not necessarily advantageous for health, longevity, and aerobic performance. You have to be like mostly just strength train and not do hardly any aerobic training for that to really happen. But nonetheless, what happens during a strength training session can somewhat interfere with what you do during an aerobic session if they're back to back. Now, if you have no choice, but you have enough time at one block of time to be able to do both, they can do both. What we would want, though, is if you're going to do them together, is do the aerobic training first. So go and do 30 minutes of the zone 1, zone 2 work, and then go do your strength work afterwards, okay? But it's typically best to separate those sessions by a few hours if you can. Wednesdays off, take a walk, do some mobility training, relax, enjoy yourself, right? So take Wednesday off. Then we have our strength sessions on Thursday. So either strength B, which would be another lifting session, but higher volume. Okay, so similar movements, higher volume, because you can still build strength even if you're doing sets of 6 to 12 reps. It will still help improve your strength. So we're doing sets of 10 with various lifts during there, and we're also doing what's called aerobic plyometrics. Now, aerobic plyometrics are designed to improve the aerobic capacity of your lower limbs and your feet, of the muscles down there, because there's continuous low-level plyometrics. So it recruits them continuously and increases their aerobic capacity, which is really important for walking that we do. And it also improves tissue tolerance, which means the ability of your tendons, ligaments, and muscles to absorb force and redirect it without being injured. Pretty important for what we do as well. It also really helps people as we move out of this really cold weather and we start getting into March and April where people might want to run more or hike more or something like that. It increases the resiliency of those tissues before we get into higher volumes of running and hiking and things like that. So there's less likelihood they get injured. So we do those aerobic plyometric sessions during the strength B session, which is just that higher volume strength session, and during strength C, which is our strength endurance, muscular endurance type session. So for this session, we're doing what's called high intensity continuous training. This shit came from Russia back in the day. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's an aerobic training stimulus for your fast twitch muscle fibers, your type 2B muscles. We do this to increase their capacity. It also helps us recover from other training better. And it's important just for us to have access to our strength over longer periods of time. So we can send the nerve impulses faster from doing the strength and power training. And then doing things like high intensity continuous training actually increases the muscles' capacity to be able to handle more work. So that's why we do that. We do it when you do high intensity continuous training, there's various ways that you can set up your reps. So the intervals are spaced out enough that you get aerobic training for your type 2 muscle fibers and not so fast that you start to jack up your heart rate and start to recruit more type 2X fibers. Because if you do that, you kind of negate what we want to do from a aerobic training for your fast twitch muscle fibers standpoint. So you can do it anywhere from 1 rep every 5 seconds up to a rep or 2 or 3 every 30 seconds. You can kind of stay in that framework and make it work. Right now, for our lower body exercise, we're doing 1 rep per side every 10 seconds. Okay, so that gives us enough to recover, but also allows us to generate enough fatigue that we're going to continue to recruit fast twitch muscle fibers oxidatively and not just going to rely on slow twitch muscle fibers. Okay. Also, the weight has to be heavy enough to recruit fast twitch muscle fibers. If you're using a really light weight, you're not gonna recruit them. You also have to have the intent to move with snap during each rep. Another thing that's going to send the message to your nervous system that you have to recruit fast twitch muscle fibers. So we'll do that on strength C, and then there's that other 30-minute aerobic session right there. If people have time, can get it in, or need to build the volume. After that, on Friday, we have those different time designations of aerobic training. 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or 60 minutes. Again, I would love people to do the 60-minute session based on time, based on their ability to recover. They can choose one of the other ones, right? So, but I mean, if you look at it, if you got a 45-minute session in on Tuesday, a 45-minute session in on Friday, then you're at 90 minutes for the week. You get one more session in, you're in a really, really good place, especially if you can get a longer session in on Saturday and say you get that 75-minute session in, right? So you're at 3 hours and 45 minutes of aerobic training for the week, which is a really good place to be at this time of the year. And also that 75-minute session keeps you in the aerobic zones for much longer. So we're improving our ability to resist cardiac drift, stay aerobic, and train our bodies to use fat for fuel much more efficiently. So on Saturday, we have a 60-minute session, a 75-minute session, or a 90-minute session. Now, if people haven't been doing as long of work, it's probably better that they start with the 60-minute session, walk up to the 75-minute session, and get to the 90-minute session at some point during this phase. If people have been doing hour sessions and 75-minute sessions during phase 1, then they're fine to just jump right into the 90-minute session. It's not going to affect their recovery too much. Then on Sundays, we take off. So we have 2 good rest days per week. So especially after that long endurance session, it's good to give your body some time to rest before you jump back into strength training. So Sunday should look a lot like Wednesday. Easy walks, some mobility, taking care of yourself, eating, all that kind of stuff. Now, what kind of means are we using for aerobic training right now? General, right? It can be different stuff. Now, if you want to do specific stuff, you can. So specific would look like getting on the stair climber. It would look like incline treadmill work, things like that. Going out and rucking, hiking, all of those kind of stuff. If you have access to that, go for it. Move at a pace that allows you to stay in the proper heart rate zones at the proper intensities, and you're good to go. But also at this point in the year, general means are fine. So that means getting on a bike. It means getting on the rower. something like that. Ski erg even can count. Although I'd rather have people moving their legs than just moving their upper body. But, you know, in some situations, you have a lower limb problem, whatever it might be, doing the ski erg, things like that, totally fine. Go ahead and do it. But general means, so we'll move general now, and we'll start to get more and more specific as the year goes on. Now, some specific training right now is good because we want to maintain those abilities and also continue to get that runway up to doing more and more specific work. So typically, most of our folks are choosing to do specific work right now, and those that need it, I'm guiding them towards doing that work, but it can be much more general right now, as at this point in the year before we progress into more specific means. So if you're wondering what you do right now, this is a really good template for you to set up your training so you're doing the right things to progress towards hunting season. Strength work, if you need more strength, if you're not strong enough, hitting 2 per week is a good idea. Then accrue at least 2 hours of aerobic training. If you know you're really aerobically fit, you can start to add in some higher intensity training this month. We're doing some zone 3 work, and then just make sure you have that undulation built into the training. So like I said, for us, we train on Monday, we train Tuesday, we take Wednesday off, we train Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we take Sunday off. Okay. That undulation is huge for allowing your body to adapt, allowing you to recover from training and to continue to make progress. Now, if you're not sure what you need right now, like what do you need from a training standpoint, we can help you out with that for free. So I have the link in the show notes, or you can just go to our website, humanpredatorpackmule.com. We have something called the Hunter's Field Test. It's going to test your mobility, it's going to test your strength, and it's going to test your conditioning in different ways so that you know where your strong points are and where your weak points are right now. You do those tests for free, you find out what you need, and then if you want to train by yourself, go ahead. But if you do that test and you're like, man, you know what, I'd really like some guidance, I'd like some help, we have 4 different ways that we help hunters train. So we have Pathfinder, which is, and I'll take a step back, there's customization at every level of what we do in Pack Mule Training Company. So Pathfinder, you do a questionnaire, I set you up on the training path that's right for you. Backcountry Ready, you test, and then you follow this templated version of the program that I'm talking about with the customization based on what you need right now in the way that I just described it. And then we have Pack Mule Elite. You go through testing, which some of the tests, depending on the person, I will individualize even the testing for the person to make sure that we're really dialing on what we need to look at for them right now. And then I completely individualize their schedule, customize everything about their training, way more touch points, all of that kind of stuff. And then if you really want everything hands-on, we have Pack Mule Apex. And that's like really, if you're a busy CEO that doesn't want any decision fatigue, wants everything managed from your ecosystem to managing how your assistants kind of manage your schedule, absolute full spectrum nutrition coaching, training, immediate updates, all that kind of stuff. We have Pack Mule Apex for those folks. Most of our folks live in the Backcountry Ready and Pack Mule Elite world, and they're all good programs. They will all get you where you want to go based on your time, your schedule, your budget, all of that kind of stuff. So we have those available to you, but if nothing else, download the Hunter's Field Test, find out what you need, follow a training template like this, and you'll start making progress towards hunting season.